The manager didn't call me into his office right away. He met me halfway down the corridor, like he didn't want whatever he had to say to sit too long in one place. His voice stayed low. Careful. The FBI just drilled open your safe deposit box. For a second, I thought he had the wrong person. Not because it sounded impossible, but because it sounded like something that belonged to someone else's life, someone less ordinary, less contained. I think there's a mistake, I said. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, the way people do when they've already seen enough not to speculate. They found cash, he added, a large amount. And he hesitated, glancing at me briefly. Other items. I knew what those other items were before he said it. My grandmother's jewelry. The last thing I'd put in there myself, months ago. Something I trusted would stay untouched because it was the one place no one else had access to. Or so I thought. The corridor felt narrower after that. Not physically, just closer. Like the air had been rearranged around a version of me I hadn't agreed to. They didn't arrest me that day. That part surprised me more than anything. Instead, everything slowed down into process, questions scheduled, statements requested, timelines reconstructed in a tone that was neutral but never casual. When I got home, there were already messages from my parents, not concern, not confusion, certainty. My mother's message was the longest. Carefully worded, almost rehearsed, as if she were explaining something inevitable rather than reacting to something shocking. My father's was shorter. A single line about consequences, about how things like this don't stay hidden forever. It didn't read like suspicion. It read like conclusion. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat with the one detail that didn't fit. Access Sove deposit boxes aren't complicated, but they aren't casual either. You don't stumble into them. You don't accidentally leave them open for interpretation. You need a key. You need presence. You need intent. And I hadn't been there in weeks. That thought didn't comfort me. It unsettled something deeper. Because if I hadn't put the money there, then someone who understood exactly what that box meant had. I went back through old memories, not looking for answers, just noticing patterns I'd ignored before. My parents had always treated boundaries as flexible, especially when it came to things they believed were family assets, financial decisions made without discussion, documents signed on behalf of, a quiet assumption that what belonged to one of us in some way belonged to all of us. I'd learned to separate myself from that over time, or at least I thought I had. But separation only works if the other side agrees to it. The agents were methodical. They didn't accuse me directly, but they didn't clear me either. I was a name attached to a box that contained money tied to something larger, something federal, structured, already under investigation. They asked about my parents. I answered carefully, not defensively but precisely. What I knew, what I didn't, what I suspected but couldn't prove. There was a moment, midway through one of those conversations, where I realized how this looked from the outside: a family, shared history, financial overlap, a safe deposit box in my name holding illicit cash. It was clean, too clean. And my parents were already moving like it was finished. I found out later they'd been telling people, extended relatives, acquaintances, that I'd gotten involved in something I couldn't handle. That this was unfortunate, but not surprising. There was no panic in their version of events. Just a quiet distancing, like they were stepping away from a story they'd already decided the ending of. What they didn't know, what I hadn't even thought about until everything started unraveling, was something I'd set up years ago, not out of distrust, just preference. When I opened the safe deposit box, I'd opted into a secondary verification system, a minor thing at the time. It logged access times with biometric confirmation tied to the bank's internal records. Not something most people paid attention to. Not something I thought I'd ever need, but it existed. And it didn't rely on memory or interpretation. When my lawyer requested those records, it took time. Not long, but long enough for the weight of uncertainty to settle into something heavier. Then we sat in a conference room with 2 agents and a representative from the bank. The document was placed on the table without ceremony. A list of access entries, dates, times, biometric confirmations. None of them matched mine. One of the agents read it silently first, then again, slower. The room didn't shift dramatically. It didn't need to. This indicates multiple entries, he said finally, that do not correspond to your access credentials. I nodded. He looked up, not at me, but toward the space where the implication sat. Who else would have had the ability to access your key? That question stayed in the room longer than anything else. I didn't answer immediately, not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud made something final. My parents had access to my things, I said eventually. More than I realized. No one reacted emotionally. They just wrote it down. And that was the moment everything shifted. Not loudly, not visibly at first, but definitively, the focus moved. The questions changed direction. The assumption that had been quietly resting on me lifted not completely, but enough to create space. My parents stopped messaging after that. No explanations, no corrections, just silence. I didn't reach out. In the weeks that followed, the situation clarified itself in pieces. The investigation expanded outward, away from me, towards something I had only ever sensed but never fully understood. My name was no longer central, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like standing outside a structure I had once been part of, realizing it had never been stable to begin with. My grandmother's jewelry was returned to me eventually. Cleaned, cataloged, untouched by whatever else had placed beside it. I held it longer than I expected to, not because it meant safety, but because it reminded me of something simple. Something that had belonged to one person, and then to me. No conditions, no reinterpretation. I still think about that box sometimes. Not the money, not even the investigation. Just the idea that something I believed was sealed, secure, defined, had been quietly opened and rewritten without me knowing. And how, in the end, the only thing that separated me from it was a detail I almost didn't choose.